Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today on the program, I have a gentleman who I first spoke to 6.5 years ago. We have shared multiple conversations over the years, a lot of information shoved into this vault that we have as we talk about things within his design experience and the community at large and construction. I have a guy with me today where we share the same birthday.
That's true.
I have with me today Adrian Worton of Daymark Design. Adrian, thank you for making the trek.
Thank you for having me and for doing this.
Hey, you're welcome. Adrian and I have now, as I said, we've known each other for 6.5 years. I have been a fan of his work for a long time, and I will say that I have been looking forward to the time at which we were going to embark upon this discussion, mainly because we've had so many of them.
Right on. That's true. Very true.
You know, give you a call and all of a sudden, oh, Adrian, I realize it's been an hour. We should probably go do work.
Many calls, 1 hour long calls.
So while I know a lot about you, I would like to educate those listening about who you are, what you are, how you started, where you've come from. So as I do with everyone, I'd like to ask you, what is the earliest inspiration in your life that led you into a career of design?
So this is funny because I knew you were going to ask this.
Of course I'm going to ask.
You ask everybody almost like an origin story.
Yeah.
And I wish, I've tried to think about it. I wish I had some kind of romantic response to this.
Well, and I can in some ways answer it for you, because based on the way you're currently looking, you look like you could be Hugh Jackman from X-Men.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
good thing there's no video for this. It's only audio. So it's a good question. And like I said, I would like to romanticize it. I wish I had a romantic answer. And when I think back over time, there are definitely certain moments in my childhood where, yes, I can recall drafting and drawing up dream homes as you're a child with, basement baseball courts and a swimming pool with a diving board inside the house. And while I have those memories, in addition to building full cities out of Lego and intricate houses and all that, I don't think was something, maybe it is something subconsciously that brought me there over time. Who knows? But I can honestly think back to when I was in high school, and I'm sure this is a very common story. We're all a little bit too young to be really kind of thinking about what our future looks like. I know, like, at that point in my life, I wasn't ready to think about my future and pick what I want, but I had always had a passion for art, and that was something that I was really, really interested in. And when I initially started looking at career paths, it was along the lines of art. What can I do in the art scenario? And I can remember sitting in that counselor's office. I can remember the carpet, the paint on the wall, everything, the smell, and thinking like, gee, maybe I shouldn't do that. I don't want to be going through school and then become this starving artist for a vision. But it was in that moment that I decided that, maybe architecture is something that I could look into. And my experience with architecture at that point was limited. At the high school, we had a drafting class. We had integrated tech classes where you would do a portion of architecture. We'd learn AutoCAD. Yeah, in high school. Yeah. So
where was this?
This was at St. Christopher's in Sarnia, Ontario. Okay. So it was a brand new school at that time. Okay. So there was a pretty advanced computer lab where we could do like their tech classes with video editing and that kind of thing. And they mixed those programs with architecture and drafting, photography, shops. So you got to kind of experience all these little unique aspects. And I had a really inspiring teacher that really was kind of driving me to try these different things because they could see that I was inspired by that.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the teacher's name?
Mr. Willicke. Yeah.
Mr. Willicke.
Yeah. And he was someone that was involved in architecture as well. So he had dabbled in it a little bit himself personally and then was a teacher at a high school. So in that moment, I decided, why not? Let's try architecture. And that's how it started. So fortunately, and I say fortunately, it became something that I absolutely loved and took to and became incredibly passionate about. So again, it just harkens back to that age of really being indecisive and so young. And like I was in baggy clothes and a skateboard, and I couldn't think about my future at that point. So it's ironic that it worked out, and it's something that's been so incredibly rewarding for me.
So what did you do? This is high school. What grade was Mr. Willicke?
Oh, I had him a couple years, 11 and 12 for sure, but I had him at 10. I also peer tutored one of his classes. So he was, kind of a continuous voice in that high school time.
You have OAC?
I did do OAC, but I only did OAC for half a year. Yeah, because I needed to work to save up money. As much as I wanted to get out of town as fast as humanly possible and start my own personal life. Yeah, I did half a year of OAC, and then
I think about that and regrets. I'm like, should I have done a half year? There's so many people that did so much more with that half year than what I had done with it, and that was just like a spread out course load.
I didn't do anything with it. I should have knocked it out in grade 12. It was it was really easy to do that, then work for like half a year? So because you only do one, I only did one semester, and then I worked for half a year to save up to go to.
My wife
school.
went to go work in Whistler. She went to go teach snowboarding in Whistler.
See, I should have done something like that.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
God.
All these wild travel stories.
Foolish.
Yeah. Do it while you're young.
Anyhow,
for sure.
Well, okay. So you finished high school, and where did you land with university or college?
I went to college.
Okay.
So I took architectural technology at Fanshawe College.
Yeah.
So that's a 3-4 year program. And then I actually did the shortened version of it. I didn't do the co-op because I was convinced that I could get out there and make it. No problem. Like I could find a job easy. Why do I need to do that co-op? Co-op's super valuable. So don't listen to me. It's a great way to gain experience. But yeah, it did it. It was an incredible program. And I did end up landing a job quite quickly out of school through a recommendation from my drafting teacher, Mr. Taylor.
Okay.
So the final year, he made a recommendation for me to one of the firms that he used to work at. I went and interviewed, and two weeks out of school, had a job.
Wow.
So it was good. Yeah.
You made the right decision.
Well, it seems so.
I mean,
but who knows? This was a time where, you had to, send out 100 paper copies of your resume, go into offices, go approach the desks and, can I drop off a resume and talk to so-and-so? It's that time of vulnerability. Yep. Whereas now it's a bit more transparent. You can kind of hide behind the computer, but it's so much more work now probably to try and get a job. But yeah, in those times, I remember printing out all the resumes and sending them out, and then hearing back from that one really great local firm for an interview where my teacher had made that recommendation for me.
Interesting.
And it worked out, and that was Nicholson Architects at the time. It's Nicholson Sheffield now, but they're a good firm out of the London, Ontario area. Yeah. So we were working on institutional projects, doing a lot of work for the University of Western.
Yep.
Really fun stuff. They were dabbling in residential, schools, everything. So I got a really, really good cross section of experience.
Yeah, I'm counting. As Adrian was talking just now, he looks at me and I'm looking away from him, and I'm counting the tabs on my computer, not looking at the audio. And I'm counting because I think it's tab number 5 on one of the windows that I have open is Nicholson Sheffield.
No kidding. Oh man. That was a long time ago. Yeah. So I've been in the architecture industry now for 19 years.
Okay.
So in my personal practice, coming up on 9 years. So that was a very, very long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I did out of school was, along with having that job, I had to start working towards licensure. So at that time, there was a new program with the Ontario Association of Architects for technologists. So I eventually worked, and this is something that I said I wasn't going to talk about, but here we are.
Well, I put my ear to the vault and I started turning.
Yeah. So there was an excellent program through the Ontario Association of Architects, and it was in its infancy at that point, right? It was a program that has now been around for 20 years, but it was similar to an internship where you have to gain all of the required hours. It was like 7,500 hours. We had to get 7,600 in all different aspects and ranges of an architecture practice, and then write professional practice exams, do a admission course. But it was very involved, and it took a little over 7 years to attain that. And within those 7 years, I moved between various firms. So prior to starting my practice, Daymark, there was a very big commitment to try to get licensed. And with that license, you would become a licensed technologist OAA, but you'd have a greater scope of practice, which was really great for someone who was in that technologist realm. So I did that. I got my license back in 2011. And then from that point, it was a constant burning kind of back of the head thing. Like, boy, I would really like to try my own thing.
I see this as like a field of dreams. You're driving and there's like vision boards as you're driving. And James Earl Jones' voice is in your head. Go on your own.
Well, I think dream's an important word because I'm not a risky person. I'm really risk averse. So it was incredibly scary to do something like that. So it took many years of almost convincing myself that that was something I wanted to pursue. So at that time, I was at the time of when I was like really contemplating going out. I was at what I would consider probably a dream job. I was working at Perkins and Will in Toronto. That's formerly Short Tilby Irwin and Partners. I'd spent 4 years there and just working on incredible work, community centers, institutional projects, really, really rewarding work. And I love the people I work with, super talented, incredible architects and designers and interior designers within that firm. But my wife and I had just had our second child. And at that time, I was living in Midland, Ontario. And Midland is, if you're not familiar with it, it's up on Georgian Bay. It is about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive from Toronto. So I would be...
Toronto, you say downtown Toronto.
Downtown Toronto, yeah. So I would be in combination of sometimes driving, sometimes catching the GO train in Barrie, coming down, getting on the subway, getting off and walking. So every day I was spending about 4.5 hours commuting. So it was really wearing me down. So as much as you love that job, and when I had started there, I had lived downtown. So it was like you're living the dream. Yeah, you're living the dream. Yeah. You know, everything's walkable. Don't have to drive. Love the city.
I didn't ask you that question because I knew this. Just for those listening, you know.
Yes, so we lived in a condo downtown, and our lives as we progressed as a family, my wife and I slowly moved outside of the city. We first settled down in Barrie for a couple of years, and then ultimately moved to Midland, Ontario, which is where my wife is from, when we had our second child. So that was back 11 or so years ago, 10 years ago, maybe, when things were still kind of relatively affordable. So we got a wonderful house and we had our second child.
FYI, but just to that point, sorry, I know that I'm interrupting you again.
It's okay.
But at the time, did you really feel like everything was affordable?
No.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
No.
Because like I say you, as a general we, collective, it is always like, it's always tight in some way, right?
Yeah. If you could go back in time, boy, would I change things.
Yeah. Anyhow.
Right. But again, that goes back to I'm not a risk taker, right? Like can't take too much risk. So we found this great place that we now live in, and we've renovated and love very much.
Yeah.
But we had our second child, and my wife was working a great job. And I, like I said, was spending 4.5 hours commuting daily. So I was exhausted, right? You'd leave at 5 a.m. and you'd get back at like 7, 8 o'clock, sometimes later. And
you wouldn't see your kids.
You're not around. You wouldn't see your kids. Yeah. So we made the decision that I would take parental leave. So I stayed home for the 9 months with my two boys, Chase and Xander. And my wife, Lindsay, went...
What's up, Chase and Xander?
Hopefully they listen to this.
Oh,
they will.
They'll listen to
They're
this.
fans of
Right?
Dad.
They have to. Dad.
Yeah. So my wife had an incredible job. We made a decision. She went back to work and I stayed at home. And that was when, you have all this time to really think. So being a dad is obviously, it's an incredible experience. Like spending that time at home with my boys it's really hard to make the decision when you get back to that 1 year mark and you're thinking, okay, do I go back? You're like, it's a really hard decision once you've got such a serious bond and a new routine. You're like, I can't, it's really hard to walk away from this. I couldn't envision myself going back to that job. As much as I like it and loved the people and wanted to go back, this was the opportunity. Now was the time to do it and make that commitment. And why not? So I had the full support of my family and I did it. I went out on my own, registered my practice with the OAA and got my certificate of practice and started work in the beginning of February of 2016. Was the inception of Daymark.
Wow.
Yes.
Do you remember what day marked?
I think it was 16th. Yeah. No, there were quite a few weeks there where I had no idea what I was doing. Right. You have the skills and ability, right? I know I could do the work, but I'm not a business person. I don't have a background in business. Yeah. I have no idea how to market myself.
Sales.
Because I had been working in larger firms, doing much larger work. And now I'm so far removed. It's not like you've got this client base to kind of call back on. Yeah. So you're really totally starting from scratch. So at that time, it's self-applied pressure, but I felt like I had to get work. Like, you got to get work. This thing's got to work. Money's got to come rolling in. Otherwise this thing's not working. I got to find a job. And so all this self-created pressure that maybe isn't necessarily relevant. So you just start
relevant to what?
Yourself and your own personal feelings. So now that I've been doing this for a while, I look back on it and I wish, and this is maybe a lesson for some of the people that might want to be starting practices. I wish I had have stayed more true to myself and my vision.
When you were starting out?
When I was just starting out.
In what way?
In my practice. Well, I think what I did was when I went out there, I was like, I'll take anything, right? So you're doing really non-glamorous work, right? So, and I did this to the point where I kind of overloaded myself. I almost went with this methodology and thought process of, I have to get work, I have to go through, because if I'm not making money, it's not successful. So you keep taking on job after job after job. And what I did was I got into the groove of almost like I forgot why I had started the practice, right? And it was to pursue your passion and your dreams. And then quickly I got caught up into the business side of things, and it more became about churning over and how many projects you can do. And I lost sight of the vision.
I think it's really, really hard to be able to do what you're talking about wanting to have done. When you're young, you want to get a paycheck. You want to feel important, right? And when you're getting a paycheck, you feel important, right?
Maybe. I think the message there that I'm trying to say is that you can be successful and be yourself, right? You don't have to sacrifice your vision or being a unique individual as a practice and put your vision in. Just don't be afraid to be yourself. So that would be my advice to myself to go back on. Be like, from the beginning, be true to yourself, and you will ultimately attract the types of clients that are into and interested in the type of work that you're putting out there. So yeah, strategically over time, I have definitely made a decision. I would say it was probably about 3.5-4 years ago, where I said, okay, I've got to kind of stop here and take stock of what I'm doing, because I was successful and I was getting lots and lots and lots of work and I was doing really well, but I was burning myself out.
I remember
so you've got anywhere from like 12 projects under construction and you're designing 6, 7, 8 homes at the same time. I guess some background here for the listeners, because I glazed right over it, is I'm a sole practitioner. So
you are?
Yes, there's not some big corporate team behind me.
That's not true. You got your 2 boys and you got your wife.
Yeah, so I am they're my support system.
Yeah.
So I am, yes, the accountant, the marketer, the janitor, everything. I hit every part of it. So as much as I begrudgingly don't want to do the accounting and the invoicing and all those things, it's all this stuff that comes along with it.
What do you actually dislike the most?
What do I dislike the most
as being a sole practitioner?
Oh, well, I like to focus more on the positive things.
Well, I'm going to get to the positive. I'm asking because it's the reality of being a sole practitioner is that you're going to do things that you don't like.
Yeah,
because you have to.
I think it's the business side of stuff, and it's not that I don't like it. It's probably more that I don't have confidence in it.
When you say the business side of things, what are you referring to? Is there a specific?
Mostly marketing, accounting, back end kind of things.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I do is experimental.
Yeah.
Like you're really learning these unique processes that are unique to the architecture industry. They're unique to yourself personally. You're trying to find your way. But yeah, from a marketing perspective, that's still not something that I would think I've nailed.
Right.
So a lot of that, where I found success is building relationships. So I've definitely found that to be rewarding and a way to find success and ultimately work. But yeah, purely marketing, that's good. I struggle with that. I struggle with that really hard. I don't know what I'm doing.
No one sees the differences of how your head is moving back and forth or not thinking about the marketing.
It's my brain looking left and right.
Well, yeah, exactly. And you're trying to really assess this
yes.
and the angst you have associated with it. Because it's important. Look, you talk about the importance of trying to be able to stay true to yourself. It's also the importance that if you're going to go out on your own and you're going to try to start your own practice and you want to be successful at doing it, you have to know that when you're going to go out and do that, if you're going to be a sole practitioner and not do this with a partner, you are going to do things that you don't want to do because you have to do them to make the business successful.
This is actually interesting because it's something that you've touched on with quite a few of the firms and individuals that you've had on your podcast so far. So I get a lot of, it makes me feel good to hear that other people have the same kind of struggle. Yeah, you're not alone in it. And so we don't have to talk that to death, but it is a real thing. And
I really don't think it's talking to death. I think you're running a business. Ultimately it's amazing that you get to be creative. You get to design all these incredible homes and vacation homes and cool bunkies and cabins and all the fun stuff you get to do on that end of it. That's the exciting part. The mundane and the exhaustive elements are the business side of this.
Yeah.
And they are no one went, you didn't get excited about building Lego thinking how you're going to have almost like a business degree to do what you do. And
it's tapping back into that raw excitement, almost like childhood. That's what I was kind of, I guess, trying to get at with the be true to yourself. Yeah. So I guess putting my foot down on myself and saying, okay, what are you doing? You're kind of getting lost in this. If you wanted to have a practice and grow a practice, do it for what you got into it for. Make sure you're working on things that you're passionate about and excited about so that every day you get up, it's enjoyable. So I slowly started wrapping up a lot of that work and then became a little more selective in terms of the types of projects that I was taking on. So my interest and passion leads more towards modern contemporary work. Mm-hmm. So if you're familiar with Daymark and you look at it now as a brand, you're seeing more of that modern stuff being put out. And that's really what's driving the practice now. Prior in those first years, I was doing kind of a bit of anything. There was large multi-million-dollar craftsman homes all throughout Ontario, commercial work, offices. I was working with other partner firms doing joint ventures. So I really had to stop and take stock of what I was doing and think about the types of work that I want to put out there. What type of mark do I want to leave on the world? And ensure that, I'm creating something that I'm proud of. Not necessarily for legacy, but making sure that you're putting things out there in the world that are going to stand the test of time. Mm-hmm. So majorly, I'm focusing on, let's call it high performance homes. I know there's a lot of talk about sustainability That word can kind of be thrown around a lot. A lot of clients almost don't even know what that word means anymore because it's been greenwashed so much. So it's like, what is sustainability? Is that this? Is it that? Is it passive house? Is it LEED? What is it? So I'm trying to,
Well,
it's all those things,
yeah.
But I'm trying to produce higher performance homes, being responsible in terms of the style of architecture. Does it suit the land? What types of materiality are you using? So I really like to use with natural raw materials, so like wood, steel, concrete, and then really try to create architecture that integrates back into the landscape. That's one thing that I'm really, really proud of, is my unique sort of, and you grow over time. That's the other thing with starting a practice, was self-discovery and growing into the type of designer that you want to be. It's a process just as much as learning marketing and anything else. So I'm not there yet. I don't know if I've found myself.
How can you say that you want to start from being true to yourself at a school if right now you're saying you still want to develop who you are and what you want to put out there?
So for me, it's allowing myself to take risks and be confident in putting something forward that I would normally be scared of, like the rejection.
Yeah.
Like, this is too much. They're not going to like it. But ultimately, you're working for a client. And a lot of my clients now have sourced me based on my style or word of mouth. There's a recommendation. So they're already familiar with the types of work based on if their friends or family have worked with me and they've seen it, they've felt the architecture, and then they've gone online and found me and sort of look at that. And then you get to know somebody. So you're ultimately working to your client's values and goals, but there's still a big part of you personally that goes into the architecture, because that's what you're creating their goals and aligning with their vision, but you're also interpreting that in your own way and then manifesting something that meets their goals and is architecturally pleasing. So I guess it's just about me personally allowing myself to take risks and push myself and not be afraid to show that option that I think might be a little too cutting edge. And I've, like, the real world experience is there's a lot of my clients where I will be timid and I'll put something out that I think is super great, but they're like, oh, I think you got a little more there. And the clients will challenge me and push me. And that ultimately leads to the more stunning, really rewarding work. But I guess what I was trying to say is, with every project, I can see more. I want to push myself more. Like, what's next? What more can I do? How much more risk can I take? And that can be from anything. It can be from working with new materials, creating super interesting details, something architecturally challenging. I want to produce something that's a little bit different that gets people excited.
So what would that look like?
Well, it looks different every time.
Oh, okay.
It's hard. It's hard.
Talking like building something that's on, like, steel posts and it's 50 feet off the ground.
I've done that.
Okay.
So I've got a house right now with wonderful clients. And I would say actually that is probably I would call it my first real project. It's the Baldy Hill house, and incredible clients that trusted me and they asked me to come up with something. So they gave me that freedom to be myself and create something. And that whole house sits on top of a hill. It's called Baldy Hill. It's in Severn, and it's all raised up on steel posts. It's a super insulated house. It's high performance. It's completely off grid. So some really interesting systems there. So that's a great example of how you can push yourself, and ultimately it leads to these very rewarding projects.
So, I mean, I would say that was probably pretty rewarding to be able to see a project go in that direction with clients that give you that form of creative freedom.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So validating.
Absolutely. I still look at it daily, bring it up. It's a good place marker for myself personally and where I want and see the firm to go. Yeah, I love it. I'm smitten with it.
Well, when I say it's interesting, you and I have spoken so much about this stuff over the last few years, and there's a period of time where you weren't sure what you wanted to do with your practice, and you had a lot of self-doubt, which I don't think is uncommon when you're running your own practice and you have a real keen interest in wanting to do an output of truly inspirational design.
Yeah.
And you're not seeing those opportunities, and you potentially, we've talked about that, having worked with some constructors who are not up to snuff.
Yes.
At
So
some stage,
when you are trying to execute projects that are of a more challenging quality level, I have a personal higher standard, right? So I'm very technically detailing these projects from every aspect, ground up. So everything's important. And the assemblies, what's within those assemblies, how is everything going together? So yes, in those early days, when you're trying to manically take on work to support yourself and your family, you're relying on, especially when you start out, a lot of teams that you're not familiar with, right? So you're taking chances. Or there's contractors that were hired by owners and you're not familiar with them. So there's been lots of challenges. But now, over time, you start to develop those relationships. You develop and start to work with the appropriate teams that that can execute on that higher level. And it's also about providing that quality product and deliverable to your client. Right. So I work with my client all through the entire process. So we create the design documentation, the building permit construction documentation. I do contract administration, go out and review all my sites. So you're acting like an agent for your client, and you're ensuring that the project is not just being built to code, but being built in terms of the documentation that you've prepared. So your client is trusting you kind of as their in-between to make sure that everything's going in accordance with plan.
Right.
And as I said, I've created these more higher standard projects, right? So that's where I definitely got to a point where I had to build new relationships, call it. You're like, well, the build worked out and the clients are happy, and there's always challenges that come about and things have to change inevitably. It could be materiality, it could be project cuts due to cost. So really there's a big learning curve and learning process. It causes you to work sort of in different fashions. So recently I've really taken to move more towards an integrated project delivery. Everybody throws that around. Nobody really knows what it is.
What is it?
But the way I look at integrated project delivery is kind of bringing everyone to the same table. So usually the point at which I get hired, there's a lot of process that I go through with learning about the clients, surveys, everything. So you understand what the client is looking for. And then I can rationalize based on location and how the project sounds, who might be a good fit for that. So then I put forward a few contractors that I think would be good for the job. And then through an interview process, hopefully get a contractor on board before you start. Then you've got everybody sitting at the same table. Everybody's got ownership. Yeah. They can add their expertise and experience to the project, make recommendations and suggestions. So you're creating this thing that everybody's proud of and everybody's got a piece of. And we're ensuring that what we're designing and documenting is going to meet and exceed the client's goals and stay on budget. Everybody knows that with COVID, budgets for things have completely changed. So that process has become that much more valuable to me. So that has led to some really great working relationships and starting to grow some very interesting projects and have significant confidence in the deliverables that we're putting out, not just from an architectural and interiors perspective, but from the built conditions. So,
okay. You say this, and I remember, when we first had connected, it's like, hi, Adrian, my name's Jonathan. I work at Walden Homes. We're a project management company in Toronto. I want to work together. And, I talked to you about who we were and what we were. We initially, I remember we bid on a project in Muskoka. I remember you were saying keen to have you guys on this if this works out, because what I've designed will get built the way it's designed.
And do you know what happened with that project?
I What happened with that project?
It didn't get built the way it was designed.
It was a scenario where I think you told me about this, where I remember when the foundation went in, and the foundation didn't even go in properly, right? Didn't they just like pour straight onto the rock?
They did. Generally, it goes south immediately.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. Well, I say that because, you know, it's one of the, I've said it a few times on here, but like one of the main reasons why Walden wanted to create this podcast was because we wanted to really celebrate what design is about, and what a true collaboration is supposed to be is to honor what people are putting out there. When you talk about having gone in high school and your teacher and going and deciding this is going to be a career path you want to go down, doing all of that, like the purpose that you and I talk about this is because of the importance of what your job is. And your job is there to be able to extract all this information from these people and to put your best foot forward, or I should say your best pencil forward.
Nice.
And draw it and come up with something creative where ultimately you can have a project under construction that is built on steel posts, and the clients can take a helium balloon up to it.
No, there's access. There's stairs.
I'm joking. No, but to be able to go and engage in conversations that are about what we're talking about now, because you have a stamp that goes on all of this stuff, and I've said this to other people, and I don't mean to say it in a way that like it really takes away from it, but there is so much on the line when you do what you do.
I think about that quite a bit.
Right. And you're not alone. Everyone else that's been on here and everyone that's coming up does the same. They think about it all the time. They think about it when they go to sleep. They wake up, they make a note about it, and they go back to sleep. Maybe. Sometimes I think people don't sleep over what they're thinking about, right? They're sleepless nights.
I sleep well.
Well, I think that's
I'm
also,
confident in it.
But you've also right-sized yourself, right? Now, I know that you've been a sole practitioner for a long time, but there was a period of time that you just referenced not long ago where you were taking on tons and it was burning you out.
Yes.
So getting to a point where you understand how you're going to make your business fit the lifestyle that you want to have, to fit the clientele that you want to have, to fit the design that you want to push forward, that comes from your mind and extracted from these conversations. It takes time to get there.
Yeah, it's a good point, because you really are. I'm not looking for, I think work-life balance might be the wrong term. I would almost feel like I'm looking for more of an integration, and I think I've actually achieved that.
It sounds like
I'm a family man, and I'm there for my family, and I've found a way to integrate Daymark into my life where it's not a job, it's not a hobby, it's a part of my life. It's something that I'm super passionate about and driven to do. And I've managed to, with being very careful about the types of work and clients you take on, to find that balance so you can give everything to each project and your clients and not have it spill over into your life. So you're staying up till 2 a.m. and losing opportunities to be with your family. So I think I'm finally getting to that point, but it's with a lot of care, and there's definitely a tightrope balancing kind of act you're doing. And I mean that in the sense that in looking for growth, right? So you've got to be careful if it's always a question like, do I want to stay a sole practitioner? Do I want to grow? What is the vision for this? So that's that kind of business side again, where it's coming up.
So what is
the answer?
Yeah,
I definitely want to grow, but when I grow, it'll be holistic. It'll be something that's born from the desire of clients in the outside world looking for that. I want to make sure that I continue to produce projects of quality, and I want to be able to deliver for my clients. So residential architecture, when you're designing a shelter and a home and somebody's safe place in the world, it's very, very personal. Most people only do it once, and it's something that they've thought of for a very, very long time before they get to the point of sitting down in front of you and say, hey, like, this is what I'm thinking about. I would like to start designing dream home or cottage. So there is an incredible amount of responsibility that we're tasked with. And I take that very seriously. And so it's that private nature of it. And I feel, again, super honored to be asked and tasked with that goal. But with that privateness comes this intensity, and you are incredibly involved. And it takes an abundance of passion and patience. And
I was waiting for the patience.
Yeah, patience for sure.
Patience is like one of the greatest qualities in this.
Everyone's unique.
Yeah.
Every single client that comes to me is unique. They have their own personalities. They have their own goals and families. And a lot of the projects you look at could be for different purposes, right? It could be they could be a young family. They could be a family with older kids, and they're looking for multi-generational generations living under the same roof. There's all these different complexities that you got to consider. And then they have their own goals. And then within that, each individual in that group, like it could be a set of partners, and they'll have their own goals. And you almost get in this scenario where I don't want to use like the term therapist, but it's almost like they haven't talked about everything together. So then you're trying to like get everything out of them so you can create the ultimate goal that meets everybody's needs. So it takes quite a bit of intense work.
You're like, I have the visual of when you think back on any of the old mechanisms that were used in like the early or the late 1800s and the 1900s, early beginning of 1900s, where you would wash clothes and you'd put them through the wringer, right?
Yeah.
And you would dry them out. So it'd funnel through like, it would look like two rolling pins.
What am I in this scenario? Am I the rolling pin?
You're the rolling pin.
Or am I the clothes getting squeezed?
No. The clients are. The clients are the ones that are getting squeezed. And I say they're getting squeezed because they have all this information.
You're getting that out of
right?
It, yeah.
And it's really hard for people that have never done this before to be able to communicate thoughts they've never contemplated how to communicate, right? So yeah, you're just slowly, your hand is just slowly moving them through that drawing machine.
Well, it is interesting too, because along with being individuals, there are certainly some clients that I've had that really can't rationalize architectural planning.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit old school in the sense where I still hand draft a lot. So a lot of the times if we have a meeting, I will have sketch paper out in front of me and I'll be thinking and sketching while I talk. Or you can bring up floor plans and like, well, where's my kitchen in that? You're like, it's right there. So I guess new technology and tools eliminate that a little bit, because now we can really sort of immerse our clients in these digital 3D worlds and they get an absolute sense. But I try not to get too lost in that, because it's almost faking. And I love the romance of architecture, and the process is what's really fun for me and the clients.
You just said something that I haven't heard anyone say yet.
What?
It was beautiful.
Okay.
The romance of architecture.
Didn't go the other way.
No, the romance of architecture. I like that.
Well, this is why we get into it, right? Like I'm enamored with it, and we say we're passionate and everything about it. And I am, and it is that process that is the most fun. Yes, you're excited about the end result. You're like, oh, look at this beautiful work that we created. But honestly, with a lot of my clients, it's a very long process. You are building these. I've got some that are 5-6 year long relationships. You get really close with them. You sort of become a part of their life.
Yeah.
And again, that's why you've got to be very selective in terms of the type of the work that you take on.
I get together with some of our clients. I do things with them. I understand that. I appreciate that. I think anyone listening to this that is in the field of design is nodding right now. Yep. Yeah. And sometimes you have a client where you really wish the relationship could be cut. Not often.
No, I've definitely been in that scenario, and that's part of owning your own business, right? I think over time, there's just going to be situations you're going to be lunged in that you're not necessarily comfortable with. But you were just showing me a quote earlier, but it's really relevant, and you have to give yourself an opportunity to fail. fail is where you find the real success, right?
Sure.
So,
what did I show you?
no, you showed me some Steve Jobs thing, right? Where it's like the
So,
calls.
yeah. I just want to reference this because it to me, like, this goes to what you're talking about being successful. So there was a video that I had come across yesterday, and some of you out there that are listening to this, I shared this with you, and you'll know who you are. But it's a single camera in front of Steve Jobs, and he's sitting there and he's saying how at 12 years old he called the founder of HP, whose phone number was still in the book, and he just called him because he wanted parts to be able to create an assembly for an idea he had. The guy answered the phone in his residence, and the message that Steve Jobs put out there, and ultimately Steve Jobs was given a job as a young kid to go work on the assembly line of the area where those components that he wanted from the founder were in the factory. So why I'm saying all of this and why I'm digress from what you were just about to say,
you're on it,
is because he said you have to just pick up the phone. And the difference between those that talk about their dreams and those that go and live them are the ones that pick up the phone and make the call.
Yeah.
And so you have to, to your point before about, you don't like some elements of being an entrepreneur and a sole proprietor, right? There are elements of things that you don't like, but that's the same thing. That's you picking up the phone, and I mean, differently in somewhat of a different sense, but doing the things that you don't want to have to do all the things that you want to do.
Yeah. Outwardly, it might all look like success, but inwardly there are definite moments where you definitely have to allow yourself to take risk, take chance.
Yep.
Be okay to fail.
Yep.
There are so many lessons there in those failures. And again, there's lots of these moments in my career where, there are challenges that arise and you kind of have to just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
You've got to just keep moving forward, work through those challenges because you can't stop. You can't, especially when you're an entrepreneur, everything's kind of on your shoulders.
Yeah.
So you do have to find a solution and move forward. So there's definitely key moments throughout being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, and a sole practitioner that have been serious lessons, and they make you a better practitioner. And you really start to develop and grow over time. So I can see, and this harkens back to what we were talking about just a little bit ago, but like, who am I? Right? I think for me, it's a drive. I want to continue to push myself and not get myself to that point where I'm complacent and comfortable. I want to keep that drive going and stay excited about it. So yes, I've sort of got a little bit of a niche and a look that I'm trying to achieve, but I do notice that with each project, I'm continuing to push myself or try something different. And then it's funny when I'm in the working drawing stage. Working drawings is the documentation that we prepare for permit and construction.
Yep.
I start kicking myself because I do very, very detailed drawings, like lots and lots of pages of incredible detail so that what you're delivering is really easily digestible by the municipal building department and the contractors and all of the trades and the client. But you sit there and you're like, boy, like this is a lot of work. Why did I have to reinvent the wheel on this? I would love to just churn and have this steady stream of copy and paste, but it's just not who I am. I want to create something unique and different, not just for myself, but for my clients. And I think I've definitely been successful in doing that. And you can see how the projects resonate with the clients in those final moments and turnover and speaking with them after. And you're really trying to, with architecture interiors, invoke like a feeling. Drawings and visuals are great, but there's something tangible that you get when you're on site and you feel the work. It embodies you, and you're like, those are kind of the biggest takeaways I get when I design or how I experience the world. I'm looking for a feeling in how I experience this space. And you're taking those little elements and trying to put that into the architecture.
I want to ask you a question about that because you said the world. Have there been places that you've gone and traveled in the world that you have said, like, I want to work on implementing a detail that I just saw there?
I'm not a big traveler.
Okay.
I wish I was.
That's okay.
Have I traveled? Yes, I've done some traveling, but I definitely, in being in I think the architecture community at large, everybody's kind of pretty good travelers. They've had lots of worldly experiences. I definitely need more worldly experiences. Yeah.
But what's interesting though is as you say that, I also know that you do a lot of study
Yeah.
of and reading about your craft.
Yes. Yeah.
And here and
it's very true, and I think I'm inspired by simple things too.
Expired.
Yeah, I'm expired. I'm done. Cut this podcast off. We've reached that point. Bad milk. No, I'm inspired by super simple things. I really love immersing myself in nature.
Yeah.
Camping, all those kinds of things. Like I will usually go away by myself and immerse myself in nature, kind of nature bath.
Yep.
But I do get inspired by those really simple things because again, it kind of goes back to the feeling. But I remember even touring houses with you, like when we first met, and like you just lay your hands on all the different material and touch everything and feel everything. You're like, boy, I really like this. It's probably creepy to the outside world, someone walking around touching buildings all the time.
We're all doing it.
But no, like the feeling of space and how you interact with it. Those are the biggest takeaways. Light, how light affects the building, the interiors, your emotion, everything. So that experience is a really big takeaway that I try to learn from and grow and change and morph on different projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I really find that from a planning aspect, I guess it depends on how you've grown up. So
Yeah.
I grew up in a wartime house, so a small little house. And then we moved to a house that was my grandparents,
Yeah.
and we inherited from them. Not inherited, but traded houses almost. And it was a little bit bigger 1960s house, but so I never really lived in anything architecturally significant.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. So I do find that interesting now when you sit down and I come up with these, what I find maybe are more forward thinking, modern planning exercises. Yeah. When I work with somebody that's had the same life experience as me, like I've never thought of a house like that, or I've never thought of a space like that. That's interesting and rewarding. And then you can really I get excited, and then you start to walk them through how this can be different and exciting, and you kind of can put them into an experience where they're starting to experience the space
right
before you've built it, and sort of change their mind on what architecture and a home can be.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I can associate with that because I just walked you through my house.
Yes, exactly.
And it was built in 1948, and there was no insulation in this thing, and we lived in it before renovating it. And I was like, we're going to reinvent this entire thing.
And you did.
It's amazing how you just take a shell and you just completely flip it on its axis. And
renovations as a project typology are, I find, more challenging than new construction.
Certainly. You're working within the confines of what's there in many ways.
Yeah. Sometimes I can definitely point to projects, even recent ones, where there are very extreme parameters, right? Like you've been pushed into a corner and you're designing in a box, but you want to field that challenge and come up with something great. And that's hard. Like when there's significant parameters, renovations like your house, it's that exact scenario.
So I'm pointing right now at the corner, the connection between the roof, and I'm in a semi-detached house in Leaside. And so Leaside, for those of you that are listening to this and are not from Toronto, Leaside is
You mean Toronto?
Sorry?
You mean Toronto?
I know. I said Toronto. I don't know why I said it like that. I'm not from here. From Toronto. So it's a small community. It's essentially near one of the first planned communities in the area. It's an amazing little community. But I say this because this whole area is 1948. And when we were working on the roof connection where the addition is on the house, man, the detail, and you have to deal with fire separation and how that beam was going to sit into my neighbor's house, and Jen and Greg, we did it. But like doing those kinds of things, thinking about that, how it's going to come together, satisfy all code requirements,
There's a lot going on.
And the communication and the integration with trades and engineer and all the people, like it's an immersive experience. It's amazing. If you ever have the opportunity to do it, if you're listening to this and you're not in this industry and you are a homeowner and you're thinking about doing this, I'm going to tell you got to find the joy when you eventually get to it, because it is amazing.
So we from our side of things, that's how our minds work.
Yeah.
Like when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking about everything, not just the space and how it's going to work, but from the technical aspects, like you just touched on it there with a structural beam. It's like structure. How's this wall going to work? How's this roof going to work? If I move this here,
how are you getting the beam up there?
Exactly. We've had those scenarios too, where the beam's the length of the house.
Like
and you're like, I don't know.
I remember picking up that. I rented a U-Haul, a 20-foot U-Haul, because the beam was 18 feet.
Yeah.
And
And then you got to close down the street. What
No,
part of the house are you going to bring it in? You didn't?
No, we'd have to close down the street. No, that was everybody ate their Wheaties that morning and we just carried it up.
That in itself can become really prevalent on certain jobs.
Yeah.
Like there are really remote places in Ontario with very sketchy, windy roads.
Yep.
So then you start after thinking from a TRLR perspective, I'm not getting trusses down that road, so I'm going to have to stick frame this whole thing. Or is it an island job? What fits on this barge? So there are definitely really interesting, unique challenges like that.
Yeah. Adrian, I got to tell you, it was a pleasure talking about all of this. I apologize that I feel like I'm almost cutting off the conversation short, but generally when you and I talk, this happens.
This went quick.
One of us will get a phone call from someone else that we've got to go take, or there's a deliverable that we've got to go look after. And so I feel okay in saying, you know what, I appreciate you driving here. Appreciate the time. It was great to sit down and chat with you again about all of this. And I look forward to the day that, Walden and Daymark partners on another project again.
It's going to come again.
Because it's going to come again. I agree. I agree with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the candor and the honesty and the little bit of laughter that we had here.
Was I vulnerable? Was I too vulnerable?
No, you were great.
Okay. Cut that out.
No, we'll leave that last part in. And that's it. Okay.
Okay.